Okay, thoughts on Cyberpunk. So actually,
Ooh.
there's a Flash Kits that came out. I'll give you guys the link for it just a second here. But I was gonna play it, but I just haven't had the time. And when it first came out, there's just so many bugs and so many issues with it. So yeah, here we go. Okay. So if you guys want the initial thoughts, here's the YouTube link that you can take a look at. There you go. You can just save it and type it, and you can watch the Flash Kits on Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk is sorry. Oh my gosh.
There we go.
I was just talking to John about that today. Apparently he beat the whole thing. I
He
was like,
did.
I just couldn't quite get through it. You know, if you exit water onto a slope, like if you try to exit water, you're just stuck. You just get stuck right at the water's edge. It's just like, that's not even
I
broken.
think
just
they
forgot how to
fixed
play.
that in like patch 197.
What in the world? Valheim.
Valheim. What's Valheim? That's like a Norse area, but is there a game?
Yeah. Is that okay? I don't know about that. We'll have to get more clarity. Thoughts on Diablo 4? Ooh, that'd be good.
I've been hurt. You know, did I ever tell you about how to rewrite the plot for Diablo 3?
You know, I did hear this. I like the gameplay of 3, that was my first exposure to Diablo. So if you're a purist, I can understand if you didn't like the story very much. It might take away from it a little bit.
Well, there was the roots of a good story were actually there, and I was really bothered because it was low hanging fruit. The gameplay was pretty good, and they worked really hard at trying to keep things pretty balanced. But they went full WoW with it, so every class kind of converged to each other, and there was no you had a fixed leveling system, and there was a good flow, good progression, good combat. It was an enjoyable game to play.
Yeah.
But the problem was that they didn't work with the characters that they had. The problem with Diablo 3 was that uh, first off, they had these amazing starts, like Zoltan Kuhl in Act 2, who's immortal and he's a super interesting guy, and he creates the Black Soul Stone. And instead of using him, he just betrays you instantly, and you kill him. You never see him again, except for, I guess, in the expansion pack, you run into him in a cave or something like that. And here's what I would have done with that game. So in the Diablo 2, all of the characters from Diablo 1 basically became corrupted, and you had to kill them, or you interacted with them in some way. So the warrior in Diablo 1 was actually the son of King Leoric, and he's the guy who shoved the soul stone in his head and became Diablo in Diablo 2. And then the rogue became Bloodraven from Act 1, and then the sorcerer actually became the sorcerer that was in Horizon Sanctum in Act 2. So all of them, it showed you that evil is super corrosive and corrupted. The problem is you play Diablo 3, it's like you have these godlike heroes who did all these amazing things in the prior game. Where the fuck were they? Where'd they go? They just like hiding under a rock, or they went to hell and like ripped the stone out of Diablo's head and cut his head off in hell. I mean, these guys are no joke, right? So you got to do something with them. So the thought process was that you should use each of them as kind of a MacGuffin to introduce an act and kind of showcase that there's something grander afoot than what was happening in Diablo 2. So my thought process was that in Act 1, you bring the paladin in, and he's now like blind and he's a bit schizophrenic. And actually, when Tyrael crashes, he's kind of the person who's taking care of Tyrael because he actually knows he's Tyrael, but they don't reveal that. But keep that was a good act. I think it was a good opener. It was very well structured. There was good pacing, good balance. But you need to introduce the paladin and have some sort of sacrifice thing for that to give Tyrael his memories back. And it's a good way to get the paladin to go out. Now, Act 2 with Belial, the Lord of Deception, like literally the minute you meet the child emperor, you're like, oh, that's Belial. It's like, come on, guys. So what they should have done is had the sorceress retire there, and her assassination is what brings you there because you know that Belial is involved inside of it. And so you attend a funeral and you're doing this whole thing. And then you have a character that you think is Belial, and there's a lot of evidence that points in that direction, and you're working with somebody to do the investigation. And then you just keep going and going and going. And then you have this awesome boss battle and you kill him and you're like, I won the game. So you go back to get your reward like you would normally in any of the Diablo acts. And then the guy who is like the person having you investigated, suddenly he just changes into Belial and attacks you in town. And you're like, oh, fuck. You weren't preparing for that, right? So that would have been a lot of fun. Now, Zoltan Kuhl, I thought, was the perfect character to carry into the rest of the game, and I'll explain why in a second. So when you rescue him, put him back together, he initially betrays you, you subdue him, but instead of killing him, Tyrael's like, we got to keep him around because he's the only person who understands how the Black Soul Stone works, and this is a major thing, and it's filled with all the souls of the primevals. It's their chance to win the war forever. So Tyrael binds him to serve you, and then he becomes a companion, like a replacement for Deckard Cain, and he's like a dark Deckard Cain, basically. So then you go to Act 3, that's the Osmodon act, and there, you have to have something to hold back the armies of Osmodon. Well, then what you do is you have the Barbarian, the Necromancer pair up, and you just have them kind of as a comic relief, and they're literally holding back the entire armies of hell, which gives you the opportunity to go into the volcano, kill Osmodon. Now, you make it look like that Zoltan Kulle is planning on betraying you, and then it turns out it's Adria with Lei, and they do the whole Diablo Prime thing again. And then you go there, and then Zoltan Kulle goes with you to heaven. You have the big fight with the primeval, and then they still have the Black Soul Stone, and they're like, we got to destroy this thing. It's bad news. So Zoltan Kulle's like, well, there's only one way to destroy it. You have to go to the Hellforge and break it down there. So then you have this epic battle where you basically go into hell to finish off Act 4, and then you have to like survive long enough to prepare the Hellforge to destroy it. And then you realize that the only way to destroy it is someone to sacrifice themselves. So Zoltan Kulle actually sacrifices himself to destroy the stone, and you get the hell out. So you have this nice redemption arc from the guy who made the Black Soul Stone, and you think he's a bad guy. And it turns out that humanity can go both ways. They can be evil and good. So it just depends on that. And you can also, the other thing that really bothered me was Imperius. So you read the lore, and he's like this super badass angel. He's got a spear like literally forged in a star. I mean, he's like the ultimate warrior. But every time you run into him in the game, he gets his ass kicked. You're like, guys, you're telling me he's a badass warrior, but literally every time I see him, he's getting fucked up.
Yeah.
So, and that would give you an opportunity, the hell battle, to actually show how powerful he actually is, and these types of things. So it's like, that's how I would have done it. That would be the sketch, and we'd work with some rewrites and kind of clean it out and do some interesting things. And structurally, I think it would have flowed a lot better, and it would have been a more enjoyable game. But it wasn't a terrible game. I didn't leave it with rage. And so how dare you, you've ruined my childhood. I will never have a future because of you. Now on to the question about Diablo 4. I'm cautiously optimistic, but modern video games, there's only a few studios like Lariat and others that really make good stuff anymore. And the indie guys still do good stuff, but I'm super skeptical these days of this stuff.
Yeah, the big studios are closer to like Marvel movie constructions now. It's just experiential. It's not really story driven or character driven. It's just massively it's just like a big simulation. You just step into a world. That's a bit what Valheim was. I forgot that, but that came out during the pandemic. It's like this Norse open world thing.
There are some strong opinions of Dota versus League of Legends.
Oh man.